Welcome to the 777 Prayer and Health Ministries, a global movement without walls or borders, where Jesus Christ is exalted as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We exist for the threefold purpose of education, proclamation, and holistic health promotion. Join us daily at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we pray, praise, and ground our faith on the sure promises of God.
A pleasant evening and welcome to the 777 Prayer and Health Ministries. We're so delighted that you could join us for this wellness series here on this amazing platform. I'm your host, Pastor Desmond Hay, and I am delighted to be with you this evening and to welcome you to this amazing series that we have been doing, a series that focuses on mental wellness. Today's series, we will be featuring a dynamic, spirit-filled, and a professional individual who will be sharing with us on the important subject of depression. Permit me to welcome you and to introduce him to you this evening. But before I do that, if this is your first time, we encourage you to please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel out there. If you're in the room, we want to invite you also to invite your friends by sharing the link. The same way you came is the same way others can be introduced to this platform. We encourage you right now to please go ahead and share the link with your friends out there. Our live stream is on YouTube at 777 Prayer and Health Ministries. This evening, we are so delighted to welcome to this amazing lecture series a dynamic presenter by the name of Dr. Donald Constantine Francis. Man, he's an ordained minister of religion with nearly 17 years of transformative pastoral experience across Jamaica, Canada, and the United States. He holds academic credentials from Northern Caribbean University, Andrews Theological Seminary, and a Doctor of Psychology from California Southern University. A specialist in clinical psychology, Dr. Francis focuses on attachment, trauma, and addiction. He has served as a guest lecturer at universities in Canada and in Jamaica and has trained numerous communities, organizations, and churches on a wide range of psychological and mental health topics. He's the founder and executive director of PsyD Services, LLC, which oversees psychological first aid centers, an initiative dedicated to training individuals as psychological first aid responders, thereby expanding access to mental health support in underserved communities. He's also the author of Transcendent Wisdom, Words of Wisdom to Live By, reflecting his commitment to practical and transformative insight. Known for his energetic yet humble approach, Dr. Francis is guided by the philosophy, quote, "If you cannot endure criticism, you will be destroyed by compliments," end quote. He shares life and work with his wife, Popson, an accomplished author, educator, and CEO of Enrique, a personal development and team building company. Dr. Francis remains committed to leading with integrity, fostering spiritual growth, and advancing both personal and professional development and serving as a source of inspiration to so many. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you this evening to help me make welcome the dynamic, the amazing, helping professional, Dr. Donald Francis. Dr. Francis, what a joy it is to reconnect again with you. Last week was a tremendous experience. We've had positive feedback to this amazing series, and I'm so delighted to come again and spend this time with you. Our numbers are building here in the Zoom room and also on YouTube, showing that there are individuals who are interested in the subject matters that you're sharing. And please note, folks in the room, this will be going all month. But we want to pause even now to say Happy Mother's Day to all the amazing mothers out there, mothers in this room, mothers on this broadcast. We want to say we would not exist without you. It is a joy for us to have mothers like you. Dr. Francis, we are going to turn the time over to you, sir, as you will be focusing this evening on depression. Here is how we'll roll. Dr. Francis will present. After he's through presenting, he'll entertain questions and take feedback from those in the group. If you're on YouTube, you'd love to join us in the group, just plug 813-1521-5055 in your Zoom app, and you can hop in the room to just have a one-on-one talk with him. While he's presenting, if something resonates, please ensure that you type in the chat. That's the way he'll be able to connect with you. It's easy as we're recording these and this is going live. It's a live broadcast. And we want to ensure that we keep a high quality production for future purposes also. So please, ladies and gentlemen, share the link, be engaged, and we look forward to an amazing time together as we share this evening. So, Dr. Francis, the time is yours. Claim your time.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Dr. Hay. It's a blessing to be here again. I enjoyed myself last time, and I'm just delighted to be here to share. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, let's see, let me get my stuff right here. All right. So I was saying I'm delighted to be here. And last week I enjoyed myself and the interactions that we've had. And it's a blessing, Dr. Hay, to be a part of this amazing series that you have planned here. And I want to welcome and also say Happy Mother's Day to the mothers to be and mother figures in the house. We praise God for your contribution to life and to godliness. All right. So we want to execute this amazing subject. And I want to just set the background of what we will be doing today. Furthermore, I'd like to let you know that this is an educational space and not a therapeutical place. We do not provide diagnoses to anyone here, or nor do we provide therapy. This is an educational space for us to interact. It's a safe place for you to express your ideas and to make sure that the material is understood. All right, excellent, excellent. So this is what we'll be doing. This will be our objective for today, so that we know that we have grasped the material or we were impacted in some way. The first, we want to identify the causes of, let's see, 1 minute here. Okay. All right. Let's see what's going on here. Give me a sec. Let me arrange this thing. All right. So we want to make sure that we are able to identify the causes. We want to make sure that we are able to define and differentiate between the various diagnoses and depressive sets or types. We want to make sure that we are able to assess risks in terms of when we see symptomologies being expressed, and especially in the context of depression, there are suicidal ideations that one can also be mindful of. And then we will propose some plans, some ways to cope, and so forth. So thank you for journeying with us. So the first thing I want us to do, we're doing this. Let me see. I'm trying to navigate my space here. Let's see. Alrighty, so we're going to do what we've done the last time, and we're going to make some assessments. So I want for you to take out your phones, make sure that you have your keypad open, make sure if you're on a laptop or any other device that your fingers are attuned to the keypad, and we are going to do something today. So let's begin. Our game is about bad or good day. All right, so let's go. So the first thing that I want you to type in the chat to make sure that you understand what we're doing. If one resonates with you, you're going to put an A or a B. So for example, if it is that it's a normal day or a normal situation, you'll put an A. If it is an abnormal or depressive symptom or depression, then you're going to put B. So let's go now. First, if someone fails a test and gets upset, what would you say that is? Is that just probably a bad day, or is that depression? Let's go. We're typing quick fingers now, quick fingers. So remember now, A is for a bad day, B is for depression. Alrighty. If someone uses or someone used to love a game or music, and they love to hang out with their friends, but for the past few months they do not find it enjoyable, what is that? What could that possibly be? Is it A or B? Alrighty. Let's say a person, you have to keep your own score. Let's say a person sleeps over the weekend. They sleep over the weekend, so they sleep for long hours over the weekend. What would you say that is? Is it A or B? A bad day or exhaustion, or B, it is depression. Number four, someone feels tired every day and struggles to focus, avoids people, and feel emotionally numb for weeks. What could that possibly be? Could that be A or B? And uh, number five, someone stops replying to messages because even small conversations feel emotionally exhausting. What would that be, A or B? What would that be, A or B? What would that be, A or B? Alrighty, let's assess what we have here. For those of you, let's see, let me go back. Let me go back to my answer sheet. Oh. So number one, let me see, for those of you who got number one to be a bad day, I want for you to put one in the chat. If you got number one to be a bad day, put one in the chat. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. If it is that you thought it was depression or possible depression, put a two in the chat. All right, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. All right, let's go. Where are the quick fingers? Quick fingers, quick fingers, quick fingers, quick fingers. All right, see, most individuals got that correct. So it is actually a bad day because you feel upset, and all of those things doesn't mean that you are having depression, although people will say, I feel depressed because they have missed some scores on a test. That's not what depression primarily is. Number two, for those of you who said that it was B, put a one in the chat. If you said it was A, put a two in the chat. Yes. One for you think it was depression or possible depression, and two if you thought it was just a bad day. Okay, well, we have brilliant people inside here. Excellent, 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 excellent. And number three, the person feels exhausted over the week. The person sleeps all of the weekend or most of the weekend. What would you say that is? Is that a bad day, or was that just a possible depression? What is that? One, if you feel it was a depressive situation, and number two, if it is that it is a bad day. Somebody says both. It could be both. I can roll with that. Somebody feels so tired every day and they avoid people. They struggle and become numb emotionally. What would you say that is? So one, if it is depression, if it is possible depression. Two, if it is that it is a bad day. So remember now, I'm asking about this one about being tired, avoiding people. So it is a one if it is depression. That's what I said, right? If you think it was depression, it's a one. If you think it was a bad day, it's a two. I think I'm getting myself mixed up. So it's one if you thought it was depression. 2, if you think it was a bad day. And the last one is if somebody stops replying to messages because even small conversations prove to be exhausting. If it is that you believe that it was possible depression, put a 1. If you felt it could be possible a good day, a bad day, put a 2. So they stop answering your messages because even the smallest conversations take so much energy, it's exhausting. A 1 if you feel it's depression, 2 if it's a bad day. All right, so let me see those of you who have gotten the most. If you've gotten all of them, then I want you to put A in the chat. If you've gotten all of them, put an A in the chat. If you've gotten all of them, put an A in the chat. If you've gotten fewer than less than 8, well, if you've gotten fewer than all of them, please put B in the chat. Uh, Alrighty. So thank you so much for participating. So what we're trying to test was our understanding of what depression looks like, because most times people use these clinical terminologies loosely, and they feel that if they are feeling sad or they have had a bad day, they say, I'm depressed. And that is not really the wisest thing to do. And if you're speaking from a spiritual standpoint, there's life and death in the power of the tongue. You don't want to speak those things over you, because depression is not one of those conditions to speak over your life. All right. So let's look on a broad dashboard basis. So we are looking from a global standpoint and also looking specific to the United States. So from a global standpoint, we'll see that there are 332 million people, 5.7 of all adults experiencing or would have experienced depression sometime in their lives. Particular to the United States, 1 in 6. In fact, I read an earlier research, a recent research, which indicate is actually now 1 in 5 persons would be having episodes of depression over their lifespan. And if you look at in terms of gender, you'll realize that females are more likely. In fact, they are 1.5 times more likely to be diagnosed or to express and present with depression, clinical depression we're talking about in particular. And if you notice that the age group that is being impacted significantly would be 18 to 25. They are having symptomologies and they are being diagnosed such with major depressive disorder. That's what we're talking about in our lecture today. And children are also having this condition as well. So depression comes on a continuum or a spectrum. So you have the mild, you have the moderate, and then you have the severe. When you get to the severe, talking about vegetative symptoms such as the biological, the genetical situations, talking about severity in those, which would impede natural or daily functioning. So when we talk about major depression, we are talking about the inability to show up to work, the inability to engage with family on a normal baseline level. The milder set you can manage, and with routine and counseling, you can navigate through that. And the moderate situation is where you're in transition between the two. So let's look at what we're talking about when we talk about vegetative and we talk about cognitive. So the mild depression would normally present with mostly the cognitive parts, the cognitive symptomologies. So ruminations of negative thoughts, bad mood, low energy, feeling something is wrong, being very reactive and hyper vigilant, making sure that you mask behind the smile, and all of those things. Normally, those individuals can respond in therapy. Now, if you go over to the vegetative, which is the physiological and the genetic side of things, the biological side of things. You're talking about people having hypersomnia, where people are sleeping endlessly. They sleep themselves to wake and they wake themselves to sleep. That is where it becomes very, very severe. And in most cases, in order to even get them to open up in therapy, these individuals would need medication. So you cannot have talk therapy, CBT, DBT, whichever one you want to use, when these individuals are having severe vegetative symptoms, because it cannot be present. Their minds are not at a place to have that. And so one of the major things on the psychological side is an let's get this word trip me up. An anhedonia, anhedonia, right? So that is a lack of ability to experience pleasure. And we're going to look at that in a more significant way. And then there's going to be inflammation of the brain. There is going to be delusional thinking. Individuals are going to see things and believe things that are not actually there. They are going to design themselves in a particular way and create alternate realities. That is where the psychological is concerned. It can also be grief. And when we talk about grief, we're talking about if you have lost something. These psychological parts that we're talking about, or symptomology, those are normally reactive symptoms. That is to say that something triggered it. Okay, something triggered it. So if you've lost something, if you experience trauma, those things trigger it. When we go to the vegetative side or the biological side, it means that it is inbuilt in the person. Those genes are actually turned on. I'm going to share with you how those happen. And so the person's rhythm of sleep is also affected in a particular significant way. If you're with me so far, I want for you to type one in the chat. One in the chat. If I'm communicating clearly and you're getting it, put one in the chat. If you're getting it, put one in the chat. If you're not following me, put two in the chat. You're not with me, you're not understanding, put two in the chat. But if you're with me, put one in the chat. Perfect. Seem like we're going well. Let's see here. All right. So when a person is teetering toward depression or experiencing mild depression or going to significant severe depression, there is a play in the mind. It's like a dance in the mind, because the person, in order to maintain baseline, would need an extra dose of dopamine. And dopamine is the anticipatory neurotransmitter or hormone. That is what makes you feel excited to achieve. It does motivation for you. Now, because the person is moving towards severe depression, they are craving more dopamine. So they want something to excite them, to excite them. After a while, there's a desensitization in the body's response to the pleasure. So it's like if you overstimulate, it's like an overstimulation. When you're overstimulation, the body does not respond the same way it would to that type of stimulus if it is that it becomes used to it. All right. And so what happens is that the pain threshold goes, the pain is going to be more significant because dopamine falls, or the body does not recognize it, or the brain does not recognize it at with its potency as before. Then the pain goes up, and then there is the inability to experience pleasure. Right. So there's a domino effect. If a person is severely depressed and they do not interact with their medication and neglect their medication, neglect family, then there is going to be a domino effect where that person goes further into depression. All right. So persons have asked me over a period of time, can somebody in your family be depressed, significantly so, or severe depression, or major depressive disorder, and you don't know? Now, the mildest symptoms can be masked behind routine. So remember, the brain likes familiarity. So if it is that you used to get up at 7 in the morning and then you go and shower and then you get in your car and you drive to work, it's like muscle memory. The brain receives that as normal, and so the brain works with that. So a person who is mildly depressed, they will function um, outwardly while dying inside, so to speak. But if the person is severely depressed, there is absolutely no way you cannot see the change in routine, the change in energy, the change in their presentation, the sleep pattern, the eating pattern. Those are going to become very evident unless they have gone into isolation. Okay, I have said this before, and so we'll move on. So here's something very, very important that I want for us to pay attention to. Once it is that you are triggered and a depressive episode has been triggered, the brain uses that trigger as a default system to say that depression is an alternative way of living. Let me say that again. If you got that, put one in the chat. Sometimes I can't see my chat. If you got that, put one in the chat. Okay, put one in the chat if you got that. If you got that, if you receive what I'm saying there, and you got the potency of what it is that I'm saying, then I want for you to put one in the chat. Watch this. In other words, there's a neural pathway that is being created by the fact that there was an episode. So the brain will always find the easiest path towards safety. So if the brain is going to normalize that this depressive symptom is a way to remain normal, although it's not normal, it will use the least amount of energy. That's what the brain is trying to do. Okay. And so it's very important that once you see that depressive symptomologies are beginning to express in your life, make sure you go and get help. And if you see somebody doing that with those symptomologies, make sure you go and get help, because it's a reset of the brain. And once that becomes possible, then it is more likely, 90%, 80%, sometimes possible that you may fall into this again. So you want to make sure that you manage your stress level. This is very important. Managing your stress level is very important to your ability to not experience depression. So from the DSM-5, these are the symptomologies that must be present. In fact, there must be 5 out of these 9. The outer ones are what we call secondary, and the inner ones are what we call primary. So the depressive symptomologies that you will experience, and then the lack of pleasure that will be experienced. One of these must be present, the inner one, or both of them can be present. So you're talking about weight loss. It can be weight increase or weight loss. Sleep depravity, and also oversleep. And we're going to talk about oversleep and how what that looks like. And then you're going to see slowness in agility. That means the motor neurons start to slow down, and we're going to share what that looks like. And then there are thoughts of not wanting to be in the world. You don't want to be alive. You feel it's better to be out of this world than to be here and experiencing these low energy levels. Fatigue, feelings of worthlessness, feeling of guilt, lack of concentration, indecisiveness, like a burden to even come up with a decision. Those things would present. And of course, we said 5 must be present. And so this is how it looks emotionally. You're talking about constant sadness, emptiness, hopelessness, irritability. Cognitively, you're having difficulty thinking, remembering things, making decisions. Persons are going to present with withdrawal, slowness in movement, tardiness, restlessness, all of those things. And in certain cultures, this is how the depression presents firstly. Especially in collective cultures like Asian cultures and so forth, and African cultures where the people are not individualistic, but they are part of community. It shows up in this way. Okay. So the first thing that we want to make sure that we do is to strip down our diagnoses, right? So we want to make sure we form a differential diagnosis so that we make sure we start firstly in clearing our deck, we start at the biological level. That is to say, there are certain symptoms such as stroke, uh, dementia, and all of those things that affect the central nervous system can affect how depression is presented, and they can also be alternate um, symptoms that align with those and not necessarily depression. So we want to make sure that you send for a total physical checkup. Then the next thing you're going to look at your alcohol intake or your substance intake, including medication, because some medication have side effects that make people have low energy, and they present with symptomologies of lack of lack of concentration, even insomnia in certain instances. Make sure that there are no traumatic events, acute grief. If you've lost something or lost someone, it doesn't mean that you are experiencing severe depression. It means that you are actually mourning and grieving. And so that is very important that we then go and get a checkup and see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and make sure that your symptoms are aligned properly. So the next thing that we want to do is to make sure that the overlapping or look-alike conditions that do not take precedence over what it is that we are trying to accomplish. So when we are talking about depression, to get to depression, you have to look at several factors and several parts of an individual's life. You can't just see the symptoms and then just say that that's depression. You have to look at the rounded picture of a person's life, because there are several factors affecting depression. And we'll look later in our study, in our presentation, that because depression has various things that cause it, you have to rule out these things. So you talk about schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. They have some symptomologies like depression, like the mood, severe withdrawal. So you have to rule those out. So you have to make sure that there are no psychotic disorders that are present. Bipolar. In fact, bipolar is a form of depression. Depression, major depressive disorder, which is what we call clinical depression, is called unipolar because it just have the depressive symptomologies, while bipolar depression has mania, which means it has the depressive symptoms and it has this severe high and low, where people are filled with energy, they don't have to sleep, and they're hyper. Okay, severe anxiety also can cause people to not concentrate, and most times it becomes the primary symptomology that is expressed. If a person has a personality disorder, then that can also cause a different type of presentation. So let's look at some types of depression that would normally be comorbid with major depressive disorder. So this is what we call major depressive disorder, which is a clinical rendition of the symptomologies that we're talking about today. This is called persistent depressive disorder. This normally comes before this. So the persistent depressive disorder precedes the major depressive disorder. And it's normally milder, and it stays longer. All right. While for you to get a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, then it has to be consistent and intense over a 2 week plus period, right? And of course, you see the intensity there that each come with. Low mood for the major depressive disorder, consistently low, person feeling worthless, and of course, persons can, with the persistent depressive disorder, you can function fairly well, because it's low impact on your self-esteem and your mood, although it's consistent. All right. All right. Are you still with me? Checking in with you. If you're still with me, put 2 in the chat. If you're still with me, put two in the chat. Okay. Put two in the chat. Where are the fingers? Quick fingers. Two in the chat. 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 Okay. I just shared with you three types of depression. I want for you to put at least two in the chat. Let's check you. I just shared with you two types of depression. I want for you to put at least this you can type them out, or you can put the shortened version, the abbreviation. What are the two types that I mentioned? I mentioned three just now, but what two do you remember? Okay, bipolar, okay. Types of depression, types of depression. I just mentioned them. Bipolar, Most of you remember that bipolar. Okay, we've been talking about one of them, which is a major depressive disorder. Excellent. Anybody else? And what about the persistent depressive disorder? That's the one we spoke about just now. So these are they right at the top here. If you look right there, you will see them. Okay, we spoke about those just now. All right. So we have to differentiate between grief and major depressive disorder. And if you notice, when we talk about grief, we're talking about a painful feeling that comes in waves. It is not consistent. So memories may be triggered. You may smell something, see something about something that you've lost, whether it's a loved one, a job, or the sense of security or somebodyness. Those are very important things, and we grieve those things. If your reputation has been torn apart, you are grieving what you used to be and what you used to be perceived as versus what you have to now pick up from now. All right. And there is no there's no thought of dying or you wanting to die as it relates to grief. But when it goes over to major depressive disorder, you'll find a pattern that is very consistent over 2 weeks or more. It's uniformed in that way, the low mood and the perception that you're worthless and you don't want to be around, and it focuses on thoughts of death and stuff like that. So that's very important. So these are the various things that are brought to bear on whether or not a person may be experiencing a depressive symptomology and severe depression at that. So the biological, where 40% is determined by that. If your grandparents or your parents had that, it means that the gene is turned on. Have you ever heard about natural selection? It means that to survive, the gene will select what is necessary to survive. In this case, if the gene is turned on in your parents, that means you have a susceptibility to that gene being turned on in you as well. And of course, so if your parents or somebody in your bloodline had major depressive disorder, it is likely that this may be your reality. But it may not be your reality as well, likely, because it's not only genetics that cause this disease. The psychological factors which we've mentioned, poverty, isolation, neglect can also impact your sense of safety being taken away, is what we call a reactive symptom that can induce depression. Okay. And if you are on certain medication or you've experienced certain medical conditions, diabetes, cancer, all of those things can impact the presentation of depression. Let's go a little deeper in terms of the neuroscience of what we're talking about. So depression alters the connections between neurons, which means that will also impact your mood, because if synapses is destroyed, which is supposed to bring the neurochemicals and the message and the signal from one neuron to the next, the synapses is the space between the two neurons. So these are neurons right here. These bubbles that you're seeing, those are the neurotransmitters being transferred from one to the next. That's how they communicate messages. So if the synapses here is destroyed, it means that the messages can't get over, which means that if you need serotonin to balance your mood and it's not getting over, you are going to have a dip in your mood. All right. It also means that because the synapses is destroyed, or because there is neuroplasticity happening in the brain. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change itself physically. So if that is happening, it means that there are gray matters in your brain that are reducing. And we're going to discuss that some more. And once you have imbalance in any part of your brain, it's going to affect your mood. All right. So we just spoke about the serotonin, dopamine. Serotonin has to do with the mood. It regulates mood and has something to do with your gut as well. Because most of the serotonin is produced in your gut, in your stomach. So you have to have good stomach health. And dopamine, we say that is the motivation hormone. Norepinephrine, that is the alertness hormone, neurotransmitter, I beg your pardon. And then this beautiful guy right here is very important to how your brain stays alive. It deals with neurogenesis, which means it helps your brain to change, to get rid of toxin. This is the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. I'm going to show you later on in our slides how it is that stress interrupts that and causes it to dip so that your brain cannot repair. And this is what happens that I was discussing right here. The synapses decrease. That means there is no way for these neurons to communicate, which means the messages that you need to send to your brain are being interrupted. And this guy right here, the BDNF, is responsible to produce the protein that will help to produce and repair the synapses. All right, so that's important. So once the synapses decreases, then you're going to have inflammation. All right, and this word right here is called the translocator protein. This decreases, which means that the protein, it is used to show that there is something going wrong. That is what we use as protein markers or biomarkers. It shows that something is wrong in the brain. And so that's what they use to show that indeed depression is happening and measure the type of activity happening in the brain. So let's look a little deeper. We talk about the areas now that are affected by, let's check in with you and see what's going on with you. All right. How are you doing? If you're with me, put one in the chat. I know most of these things are kind of heavy. Put one in the chat if you're with me still. One in the chat if you're with me still. Okay. All right. All righty. All righty. All righty. Perfect. Perfect. So let's look now at the areas of the brain that are affected by major depressive disorder. The first place that goes under attack is the place of your emotion, the hippocampus. This is where emotions are stored, one of the places, because the amygdala also processes emotions, but negative emotions. So this is where, to a certain extent, memory is also here as well, but more memory, emotions are stored here. And in depressive individuals, persons who present with depression, 90% shrinkage, not 90%, but there's a 13% shrinkage in that area, which means that you're not able to process your emotions. You're not able to regulate. If you're in a relationship, you cannot co-regulate. All right. And so that in of itself begins to become a problem because you are not remembering what you say, what you do, what you eat, where you're supposed to go. That is going to affect your normal daily functioning. All right. And furthermore, the emotional disruption is going to be very much impacted. Then the highest levels of activity in the brain happens in the amygdala. And the amygdala is your fear mechanism. Is your fear mechanism. So fear is going to be high. You're going to be hypervigilant. You are going to be paranoid. You're going to see and believe things that are not there. All of those things will present because right here, your emotion is not being regulated. Serotonin is down, which is responsible for regulation or balancing of emotions. And now you're heightened. So you're in a fear response. You're in a flight, fight, or frown or flee mode. Okay. And then your decision making is going to be affected. Okay. So if you're not getting the messages from the neurotransmitters or via the neurons, then there's no message coming into the frontal lobe for it to interpret information, for it to give it the right signal to respond the proper way. And so this part becomes significantly smaller because it is not used. The brain is a muscle. If it is not used, if you don't use it, you lose it. Okay. Some of that I've just said to you. This hormone, cortisol, is the main stress hormone. What it does is that it interrupts the presentation or the expression of two neurochemicals, which are significant in this process. They are called uh, GABA and glutamate. GABA and glutamate. Now, GABA and glutamate, they have a push-pull relationship. So the glutamate is the excitatory hormone, which means it makes you feel passionate, happy, joyful, while GABA is the inhibitory hormone. So it keeps the emotion intact. So rather than getting too excited and overstimulated, GABA says, I'm going to hold you in check, keeping you balanced right here. When this molecule, this neurochemical combines with those receptors, it reduces and eliminates GABA's and glutamate's ability to work together. It eliminate those neurochemicals, which means that you have no ability, therefore, to balance yourself. And furthermore, it increases what we call neurotoxicity. That means your cells are dying. That's what it really means. Okay. I said some of these already, so you can just reflect on that. Okay. So I mentioned that these hormones are very important. When we talk about dopamine, it's wanting something. The anticipation of something makes you feel the excitement and pleasure of the thing, right? And then you have the serotonin. It's a stabilizer system. I talk about glutamate already. And right here, the pituitary gland, and this is where the stress response is located. But here is also something that I want you to pay attention to. I want you to hang on to this. The default mode system is very important. When a person goes into hypersomnia, which is sleeping incessantly, sleeping long, 19 hours, whole day, 24 hours. In a normal person getting 7 or 8 hours of rest, the brain goes into REM sleep, which is the deep sleep, which is where your brain processes your reflections upon yourself. That is where you talk to yourself. This is where information about yourself is processed. Now, if you go into hypersomnia, then you live in that area, and so the default network becomes distorted, which means you're going to have ruminations. You're going to have worthlessness coming out. So this is where depressive people feel like they want to be in the world. They can't think about an alternate reality to their situation. So hopelessness is very much a part of the depressive symptomologies. Why? Most times, the reason individuals are able to push on in life in the face of adversity is because they can see hope in view. They can see an end result. Persons who are clinically diagnosed with depressive disorder, major depressive disorder, they cannot see hope, no light at the tunnel. And so this is where it begins to happen in the subconscious, and it drives their decision to want to be not in this world, not to show up to work. What's the use of showing up to work? What's the use of interacting with your family and all of those things? And then that drives the inflammation in the brain. Okay. And I did indicate to you that serotonin has a relationship in the belly, all right, in the gut. So we spoke about these already, so we'll just run on. So here's what we see on the surface. We see these individuals as lazy, incapable of making decision, but that's not the issue. There is a neurochemical, a neurological part that is missing. The biological part is suggesting that the person's frontal lobe, which is the frontal cortex, is not having enough information because of the breakdown between the neurons, the synapses. It's not getting enough message. It is shrinking because it's not being used, so they don't have the willpower to make decisions. There is not enough power going there. There's a short circuiting in that system. So they can't make decisions. So they present as indecisive. Whereas we see them as over dramatic and overreacting, it is because this is the only system that is working over time, which is a stress system, the fight, the flight, the frown, or the freeze. Okay. And then you're going to have a situation where they will present as overthinking everything. They see the world negatively, and every interaction they have with somebody would be presented as against them, even when it has nothing to do with them. So, for example, they're walking on the street and they see somebody looking at them, they will feel that that person is judging them and seeing what they're seeing. Why? Because the default mode network has been corrupted by the negative self-talk that is stored there. Okay. They can't get up and do anything fun because, again, the dopamine neurochemical is out. So this is what is happening in the brain. There is lack of flexibility, lack of executive planning, which the frontal lobe or the frontal cortex is responsible for this. So they can't plan, they can't prioritize, they are paralyzed actually, and they can't remember things, or they remember in fragments. So that is, and I discussed this already, where the default network is going to be affected significantly. So this is how they present. What is wrong with me? Why can't I get it right? They're going to talk about why this has to happen to me. And so it's always what is being done because they are not having enough to process what's going on in the brain. All right. Okay. We're coming down to a close shortly. Okay. All right, so we talk about the brain's ability to repair itself, and we talk about the importance of the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is the fertilizer for neurons. They actually repair neurons, and GABA and glutamate, they cause a certain chemical, a certain protein to be released that would repair the synapses, and that's what we call neurogenesis. And that will help to repair. So, for example, if a person is going through depression, clinical diagnosed depression, their brain can come back to normal so long as they keep on that trajectory of making sure that when it is that they get medication, for example, to come back to baseline, and they engage in talk therapy and make a routine out of what it is that they have discovered in talk therapy, their brain can come back, and the regulation of the neurochemicals can come back in effect that would cause neurogenesis, that would repair and cause new neurons to grow. So it's not a hopeless situation, it's how we deal with it. All right. So anyone on this call, if you know anybody messing with alcohol and having significant conflicts in their family, live in a state of anxiety and conflict and contentiousness and cantankerousness, is not a good idea because you're making yourself susceptible to depression. Okay, let's look how this manifests in terms of parent-child situation. So if a parent is diagnosed with major depressive disorder, they will have hopelessness, lack of motivation. They will not be able to sense the need of their child. They will not be able to respond appropriately to that child. They will under-respond or over-respond based on how they are in that moment, which means it's going to be disproportionate. The child then does not know how to predict the movement of the child, which leads to insecure attachment. Insecure attachment creates child modes, which are going to be the working models that the children are going to use when they become adults to see the world. In this way, the environment is created for this child to be depressive, present with sadness and a pessimistic view of life. Okay? So there's a difference between diagnosing adults versus children and adolescents. So adults over time, and let me say this right here. So bipolar, which is depression and mania, okay, that will be diagnosable earlier than depression. So bipolar starts in teenage years. You can diagnose that. You can see the depressive disorders. You can see the mania with the excitement, the erratic behavior, plus the sadness. That can be diagnosed earlier. Depression, though, masks itself behind all of those psychotic things that we've mentioned and the vegetative symptoms that we mentioned. So you have to scroll down through trauma, through grief, and come down until you reach the base of what it is that is happening here. In adults, adults normally have a consistent mode of operation. So you can see when moods dip, you can see when moods change, you can see when behaviors change. In adolescents and children, this is not always so because the children are trying to find their level of emotion. They're trying to regulate. They're trying to figure out who they are, how they express certain emotions, how they react to certain emotions. So we are very tentative when we try to give diagnosis to children for depression. You have to go through a battery of tests to make sure that you're giving the actual diagnosis. Okay, and I said this before, where it is that cultural variances also apply in this. One of the major things that we see in depressive disorders, and especially major depressive disorder, is that there is suicidal tendency. And most times when they attempt suicide, they are successful. All right, so you see, the reality is that 727,000 persons die. Depression is one of the leading or the third leading cause of death in early adulthood. All right, and 60% of them actually die, and they have other conditions with this. All right. So when it comes down to suicidality, you want to make sure that if you see persons or hear persons talking about not wanting to be around, feeling trapped in their life, they want to isolate, they want to buy up pills, they want to, all of those things, you want to make sure that you know that is high risk. You want to ask direct questions. Do you feel like you don't want to be around anymore? Do you feel like you want to kill yourself? You want to figure out if they have the means to do this. And then you have to connect them to professionals. Make sure that you report this or talk to family members, because sometimes people say they want to do it, but if they don't have the means to do it, or if they do not have a plan to do it, it is not necessarily a significant major thing. But you can't take the suicidal ideation lightly, though. But there's also a continuum to this as well. Okay. So there's going to be toll on the body, and it's going to affect the relationships that you have. All right. And many times when there's depression, there is always a thirst for something to correct it. And that's where self-medication and mutilation come in. Persons top up on the alcohol consumption, conflicts arise in the family, all of those things. So you have to make sure, if you're married, you want to make sure that if you see these, you don't just take it as your spouse acting out, but there may be something happening, especially if they've lost something, lost someone, or there are depressive conditions in their family. You want to make sure. These are the tests that clinicians use to test the condition, right? So this particular polytrophic factor, this is a neurotransmitter, a transportation protein, which allows for the uptake of serotonin. So if this is being affected negatively, then by stress impacts how this is expressed. When we say express, it means that it doesn't trigger it to activate. It doesn't activate it. So if cortisol is causing this to not activate, it means that you cannot get enough serotonin from the synapses to balance out your mood. So stress is very, very dangerous. I know that there are some people dwell in high stress, and I'm not talking about the good stress, I'm talking about the chronic stress. You want to make sure that you reduce your stress level because it not only produces or help to produce the environment for depression, but it also messes with your physiological being. You will get sick. You are more prone for stroke and even dementia. So this is very important. All right, this is very important. I'm going to run past this so that I don't. But this, let me go back and say something. So this is a type of cell in the body that activates certain cell in the body, and what it does is that it makes glutamate and GABA to respond in balance, and then they select energy or metabolize fat cells or fats, good fats for energy rather than using glucose. Because then, of course, if there's too much sugar, then it also throws off the hormonal balance, right? So these are the type of therapy that you will use to combat depression and to treat it. CBT is always one of the best means of talk therapy. It challenges distorted beliefs, challenges negative concept. It reduces self-criticism. It gives a real-time assessment of who you are in context and in content. Okay, that will also act um, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. That will also help you to view yourself in context and content. Content, what you say about yourself, the context, you take yourself out of it so that you can see what you're in. All right. And of course, psychodynamic, which is where attachment theory comes in. Okay. So these are what clinicians will prescribe, especially um, prescribing prescribing clinicians, such as psychiatrists, they would normally do this. Some psychologists, if they do additional training, they can prescribe those. Okay. 1 minute here. Okay. So this transcranial magnetic stimulation is a new type of treatment, which it revitalizes, it stimulates the newer cells, those areas that would be dead or would be going through inflammation. What it does, it allows for a triggering of those, revitalization of those to see if neurogenesis can be activated to reduce the symptomologies, to make sure that there is enough signal passing through the synapses to go to the frontal lobe, to make sure that there is a reduction in the hypersensitivity and hyperactivity in the amygdala, to make sure that there is more activity in the hippocampus with memory and emotion. So that is what is happening right there where this is concerned. Alrighty, so here are some baseline preventions that we want to recommend. Your nutrition is very important. Make sure that you're low on sodium in your diet, and sugar is always not good. Making sure that your sleep is consistent with the prescribed 7 to 9 hours. If you find yourself wanting to sleep endlessly, that's an indication that you're introducing the vegetative symptomologies. Make sure that you stay in social connection. One of the dangerous things that social media is doing to human beings is that we have become isolated, though we have many friends. And so that also creates a situation where you feel disconnected. In relationships, your body produces oxytocin to help you to bond. It also creates dopamine that is good for motivation and it keeps you alert. Whereas the AI and the social media doesn't do that, it actually makes it dormant. All right, early intervention is always important. So Let's quiz you tonight. Let's quiz you tonight. Let's quiz you tonight. That's the end of my presentation. Where you're able to identify the causes of major depressive disorder. If that's the case, put one in the chat. If you were able to do that, put one in the chat. You were able to identify the causes of major depressive disorder. Put one in the chat. Let's go. Quick fingers. Quick fingers. Quick fingers. If you were able to do that, put one in the chat. If you're able to differentiate the types of depression, put two in the chat. Perfect. If you are not able to do that, then put a 0. All right. Were you able to assess risks? I'm talking about suicidality, suicidal ideation. Were you able to do that? Put 3 in the chat if you were able to do that. Put 3 in the chat if you were able to assess that, making sure that you know what to look for. If persons are talking about not wanting to be here, you make sure you assess if they have the means to carry out the activity, and then you make recommendations, of course. And were you able to know and identify that there are treatments for major depressive disorder? If that is the case, put a 4 in the chat. Perfect. So, Dr. Hay, I have completed this phase of my journey. If there are questions, I'll be open.
Thank you so much, Dr. Francis, for this amazing presentation this afternoon. I am just so delighted that your presentation offered a clinically grounded overview of depression as, from my vantage point, multidimensional conditions rather than just single uniform illness, which is so very instructive. What stood out for me the most was the emphasis on depression sitting on a spectrum, from situational low mood through severe, recurrent, and treatment-resistant forms, and how this shapes diagnosis and prognosis and treatment planning. And it's fascinating how your expertise, you were able to integrate the biological underpinnings, neurotransmitters, dysregulations, HPA, etc., in this most informative presentation. I thought this was well done. I am particularly pleased with the level of research that you have brought to this space, and I am confident that those who are here have been impacted. And I don't know if there are any questions currently. I just want to yes, there is. And I want to just go, if you have a question out there, you can please put that in the chat as I engage the good doc here. And he will provide for you his best perspective on this. I see a scene, right? Do you think medication will help with these kinds of depression, as you mentioned in your presentation?
Absolutely, absolutely. So remember, when we talk about depression, it's on a spectrum. So if it is that you are mild, you don't need primarily medication. Talk therapy, CBT can help with that. ACT therapy can help with that. So you want to make sure you engage with a therapist who's well trained in these things and can diagnose and can guide you through the process. So if it is that it is severe, it is when it is severe that you need medication to bring you to baseline in terms of your hormonal regulations or your neurotransmitters, because the neurotransmitters are off. They're not firing as they should. And if they're not firing as they should, they are not creating the pathway for your brain to function optimally. And as I said earlier, the gray matters that are in the brain, gray matters are what provide the signal. They are what process the information that you get. While the white matters are what connect them, right? So that is what the medication is trying to do. It's trying to provide the environment for you to be at baseline And then you go to talk therapy. So the medication does not solve the issue. Okay, because you still have to learn to regulate yourself. So medication, by and large, only fix symptoms, right? You still have to work with yourself through the counseling and all of that to bring yourself to a place where you can maintain um, daily functioning. I hope I answered your question.
Excellent, excellent response. I hope that was helpful for you all seen. There's another question, Doc from Gilmore said, you mentioned that depression can be hereditary. Can this be removed from generations? If so, how? Very interesting question.
It's a powerful question, and let me approach it this way. So remember, there are several factors that are being brought to bear on depression. That is just one. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind. That is just one. Of course, genes are expressed and turned on by environment and by genetics. Okay, so we're talking about genes turned on. If they are turned on, that means they're activated, right? So if you have the susceptibility within your family to have that gene turned on, then if the environment is created, it may turn on. But if your generation has gotten to the place where they have recalibrated their brain and their system so that now the neurotransmitters are working properly, the synapses have been repaired, over time that gene will be less expressed and hopefully may even be extinct or become dormant or not expressed at all. Again, I said to you earlier that if you had an episode of it, the likelihood that it will come back is also. So you want to manage the symptoms, manage the conditions, the stressors. And once your stressors are managed, the genes may become dormant. And that is what you want, for them not to activate or turn on. Does that make sense? Did I answer you? Okay.
Yes. There is, I think that was quite solid, and I see that there's a follow-up by Alcine here that some of these meds give the signs and symptoms of depression, even though you're taking it to make you feel better. Uh, do you want to
Yeah.
respond to that?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. The meds do not fix the depression. You have to continue with therapy to learn to regulate your emotions. Remember, the regulation of the emotions and to get activation in your hippocampus, in your frontal lobe to reduce the stress response. Once you bring down your stress level, then that is one major factor in progress for you. Because if you bring that down, that means GABA and glutamate will be able to produce the neurogenesis that is necessary to repair the synapses. Once that is done, you're on your way. All you need to do now is to go to a therapist, consistently stay with that therapist until you've learned the tools to manage your emotions. So when you're triggered, you know your triggers, you know the environment that you do not dwell well in, you know how to soothe yourself, you know how to ground yourself. All of those things will keep you calm so that you do not activate the negative things that you don't want. Okay.
Good,
Does that
good
make
stuff.
sense? I think.
Good
Okay.
stuff. Good stuff. There is another question here. What role, if any, does your spiritual life, as in your relationship with God, uh, helps or I imagine help someone who is depressed to mitigate against depression? I guess the question is does spirituality have an impact on individuals who are dealing with depression?
Thank you. I will answer the question in two parts to bring balance to it. So there's a tendency in our spiritual context to not be keen on mental health and mental illnesses. We call them demon possession. And even though we know from a spiritual standpoint, many things are spiritual, we do not want to rule out the psychological and the physiological parts of us because we are composite beings. So God made us spiritual, He made us emotional, and He made us, all right, physical. So we want to make sure that we look from so some of us, what we've done is to offload our symptomology to say it's demonic. That in of itself does not present a reasonable solution because you still need to learn to manage your emotions. God gave them to you. Emotions are tools of information. You can get so much about yourself and self-awareness by just engaging with your emotion. However, on the side of hope, here's where it helps now. So I was balancing it. Because in depression, hope disappears or hope minimizes. Because you're looking to your hope and holy, which is your God, then that creates an excitement because now anything you anticipate that is great, it induces the production and the release of dopamine. If dopamine is released, it means that you have motivation. It means that you are excited about the thing and you receive the thing in your body, although you have not received it. Dopamine brings it alive in you. And that is why the anticipation of a thing is greater than the receiving a thing, right? So you're anticipating that this great day is coming when all of these things will be over. You anticipate that when you pray, God is going to help you. That helps you to see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is integral in you maintaining a positive outlook.
Solid stuff. Excellent response to that. There are several questions here, and we're gonna go through them. There's another question that says, is there a form of depression that hides behind functionality? That is, can one be depressed and still function to a great degree, not showing all the symptoms? Let's see here. Let me scroll here. How how does one seek help if they are not at the place of awareness? What is the best way forward for such a one? Great question.
It's a powerful question. So let's answer it in parts. So persistent depressive disorder is the mild type. Um, you can maintain functionality with that because it is a low impact on your self-esteem. It is moderate, mild to moderate in its intensity. So you can function with that. Your talk therapy will guide you through that to maintain your balance of mood and all of those things. So you can function. So any mild to moderate depression, you can have functionality. It's a severe one that loses functionality. All right. So that is part of what you've asked. Being emotionally aware means that your primary emotions, you must have a good relationship with them. So your anger, your sense of love, surprise, um, feeling disgusted, all of those emotions are primary emotions. You must have a good relationship with them. Because when things shift in your being emotionally, those are the emotions that are going to inform you of what is happening so that you become aware of where you are in time, in space. Does that make sense? So you have to be curious about yourself because nobody else can be curious about you for you. While therapists and people who are in relationship with you may be curious, you have to be curious about yourself so that you can understand when you are being affected and when something is impacting you negatively with your triggers and all of those. So I mentioned those primary emotions because those are the primary information sources for how you will show up in the world and how you view yourself. I hope that was useful.
Next question. Do you think depression is more about what's happening in someone's mind or what's happening in their life?
Okay, that's a good question. You guys are asking excellent questions. So remember, if you're using life as the external or the physical, then I can offer an answer this way. So the cognitive is where you feel things, your emotions. So that's in the mind. Okay. That is what you say to yourself. This is how you experience the world in terms of the emotion and the thoughts you have. Two, and then two, the vegetative state, where you are experiencing things physically. You're experiencing the loneliness, you're experiencing a lack of sleep, you're experiencing low mood, you can't experience pleasure and all of those things. So it's a combination because what is happening in your life is considered an environmental factor, while what is happening in your mind is considered the cognitive or psychological factor. So both, remember, it's not one dimensional, but multi-dimensional that is happening. Yeah.
Nice. And there is one more question here. It says, how does a person's blood type tie into depression? Does certain blood types, for example, a type O, are more at risk for gastrointestinal sensitivities? I imagine this is more on the physical, yeah, and somewhat. Okay. Interesting
I
question.
It's a good question. I don't know of any research. I've not read any research regarding blood type and its impact on depression. Um, I know though that if it relates to the gut health, then it's going to affect serotonin production because 90% of serotonin, which is a mood stabilizing neurotransmitter or hormone, when it's in the bloodstream, is hormone, when it's in the brain, is neurotransmitter, is produced in the gut. And that goes through the vagus nerve and interact with the brain. So if anything is interrupting the gut, the stomach, it can have an impact that will create an environment for depression to happen.
Good, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I see the questions have expired in the chat. I know most of you are on mute out there, and we are going to release the mute button. And if you have any question, if you're calling from a phone or where you do not have the app, um, we are gonna allow you at this time. If this presentation made sense to you this evening, I just want you to open with a thank you to our guest presenter. If you are out there and this was helpful, you can unmute at this time to say thank you to our presenter and if there are any questions you have.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Got a wealth of information.
Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doc. Excellent presentation. I had one question though. Imagine that a person have no family member with depression. They have kids, no sign, no depression in those kids. But they eventually joined the military. They went to serve on a tour. They came back and they themselves now have depression. Will any of their children, if they have more kids going forward, would those children have the potential to have depression via passing it along?
So that's a good question. And so we'll go back to what we were saying. It's not a given because there are several factors. So you have the biological set, and what you're describing here is what we call the reactive condition, which is to say that something happened. So he was traumatized. So more than likely, the depression is coexisting or occurring with PTSD. Okay. So it can happen and it cannot happen. It can happen or it may not happen, right? So I'm not going to say it will happen because, again, there are several factors. But we have the part where genes are turned on, and if those genes are turned on, they can pass down. But again, it's not a straight line because there are several factors that must be brought to bear. The important thing is just to remain curious about your children, about your life, so that if you see anything, you can seek help very quickly and make sure that you do not get into any depressive episode because that will create a neural pathway. And if you are experiencing depression, anybody on here tonight, I want you to know that you are not hopeless. I want you to know that you are not beyond help. There is hope. It's something that can be corrected. And I shared in my presentation that even those areas of the brain that experience inflammation, which is death of certain neurons, and all of those things can be repaired. Which means that the brain, God has built the brain with such an ability, we call it neuroplasticity. It can recreate itself. And when you sleep, and that is, I'm going to say this, I am guilty of this too, I'm not sleeping well. But when you sleep, that's the time that the brain flushes itself of the toxins and repair itself. It's very important. That's why sleep is so important. It repairs itself, it flushes the toxin of the day and gets an opportunity to reboot.
Okay. Thank you so
Excellent.
much.
No problem.
Excellent, excellent. There's one other question that I might have missed, Doc. It says, what practical steps can you recommend for churches to implement programs to help address issues surrounding depression? And then I have one final question for you before we wrap things up tonight.
Okay. So the first step that I would say that churches need to, and any organization, is to bring awareness. Awareness is the important thing because churches cannot necessarily do clinical work. So the awareness, the understanding of how these persons present, creating a place that they feel accepted, that they feel like they are not alone in this journey that they are on, and that they have a supportive community. That in of itself is curative. To know you have support is curative. And that is why even when you come to therapy, we have to form what we call an alliance. And that in that alliance between you and the therapist, they call it a curative relationship. And the next thing is that if churches can put systems in place by creating a department or providing a fund or whatever it is for persons who cannot afford therapy to access therapy where the church can pay or pay a part of it or contract somebody, or if they are trained and licensed therapists in the church, create a department where those persons can go and see these at least for preliminary sessions, and then you can refer them. Some place I passed it before, that's what I was trying to do. And it worked wonders, and I think that would be a blessing.
Excellent, excellent. And it is good that we are having these conversations. And I think it's going to be instructive for any faith community to see how they can collaborate with individuals who are trained and to access these services so that the community can benefit. It's also very insightful for the conversation to continue in churches and places of worship. One of the things I was thinking about, Doc, as you were presenting, I was thinking about the recurrence rate because, the recurrence rate remains high even after successful treatment. How do you approach like relapse prevention and antidepressant discontinuation, particularly in light of the growing literature on protracted withdrawal symptoms? Yeah, I was wondering about that as you were presenting earlier. Any light you might be able to shed?
Okay, right. So the first thing, thank you for the question, is that this journey in healing yourself of major depressive disorder is not a sprint. Okay, you have to invest time and energy into it. And the important thing is that you should not discontinue anything that you're doing until you are advised by your healthcare provider. Because it can be worse if you start a journey and then stop in the midst of the journey. Okay, there are many things that have been activated that you're working through that you need to finish and bring your brain to a place of rest before you begin to stop these things. Because we have a number of sessions that you should go through. There are signs that must be, and markers and indicators and goals that must be met to show that you have come into a normal functioning. And even when you have gotten to normal functioning, you have to maintain that curiosity about yourself. Check in with your healthcare provider every now and then. Make sure you have somebody to process emotions with. Make sure you're on top of your triggers, making sure that you know what your environment is. You're getting enough sleep, you're eating the proper food, you're going to a place of worship, for example, or having social interactions where dopamine and oxytocin and all those hormones that are necessary for human flourishing and thriving can continue to be in the abundance, making sure that you use up your mind. Think rather than using AI for everything, think through some things sometimes, because you know that if you don't use your brain, which is the executive part in the frontal lobe or frontal cortex, is going to shrink. Right? Make sure that you try to memorize things so that hippocampus can continue to be active. These things are things that you can do to make sure that you don't relapse and keep that flow and balanced, maintain a balanced life. Yes.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We are so grateful for you, Dr. Francis, in the moment, being very present, being very attuned with this most important subject and sharing from your overflow. Ladies and gentlemen, we are so thankful for Dr. Francis coming in and sharing his expertise and his wisdom with us. And please note, yeah, I see folks are just showing you affirmation out there, which is highlighting the fact that this session was meaningful for them. If you're out there, Doc, can you give them a sneak preview of next week's Sunday? They don't want to miss it. You know, our numbers are growing, but we want to double, triple, quadruple the attendance for next week because he is going to address a very important subject. And we want you all to please be that, you know, digital support and spread the word and share so that next week, Sunday, when the good doc comes back and you'll be speaking on.
I was speaking on there's hope.
Yes.
And in the context of suicide and how that
Yes.
presents. So you can't afford to miss that. And I will show you the signs of this and the subtle signs. Because sometimes we miss the subtle signs and we're looking for the major ones. And there's a subtle signs that we need to watch before they become major. Can't wait to see you.
Excellent, excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, we want you to reach out if you need a presenter for your church, for your organization. You know, he's going to drop in the chat there his contact information so that you can make contact with him and PsyTune LLC, where you can access his expertise to come to your churches to present on important subject regarding mental wellness, mental health, anything in the psychological realm that he is within scope to share at this time with you. Be more than willing to educate and empower you. So please, please, please reach out to PsyTune, and we know Dr. Francis and the team there will be more than willing to support you along this journey. I want to thank you for joining. This is brought to you by the 777 Prayer and Health Ministries. We are a bona fide 501c3 organization here in the US, and we provide conversations like this around health and spirituality and how we are able, ladies and gentlemen, to bridge that gap. And we want you to know that you can feel free to join us in this space every day, 7 in the morning, 7 in the evening, 7 days per week. And you can reach out to us. Please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's the 777 Prayer and Health Ministries Incorporated. And if you want to be a part of pushing forward this presentations like this, you want to support this, because in our community, especially in the African American, Afro-Caribbean communities, we are not really scratching where it's itching. And a part of this is a movement, a thrust to encourage and empower our people to become attuned to what's going on and how we can respond. And so we bring expertise in the room. Here are the ways you can support this ministry, and you can make future presentations like this free to every person who will join and who are able to access. So we're going to thank you for being a part of this evening's presentation. Thank you for joining us as we continue to press forward, and we look forward to seeing you next week, Sunday. Well, Dr. Francis, please, would you pray for this is the psychologist, the psychotherapist who prays with his patients. So you're getting not only the psychological support, but you're getting a kind of heaven connection there, and we know the power of divine connection and the impact on well-being. Would you pray for those who are in the room and those this evening who may be going through a challenging time dealing with depression? Would you lift them to the throne in prayer? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Let's pray. King of our lives, we crown you now. We thank you so much for this amazing privilege that we can come to you boldly to the throne of grace to receive grace to help us in time of need. Father, the world seemed to present us with many concerns, uncertainties, challenges, which sometimes create an environment for us to become hopeless. But we know that our hope is built on you, and that you promise that you will give us the spirit of love and not of fear and of sound mind. We pray, God, that as you work in us both to will and to do your good pleasure, that you renew our minds so that our minds will be transformed, that even as the outward man is decaying, the inward man will be renewed day by day. We ask, God, that you will teach us how to be curious about our emotions and to tap in and have good relationship with our primary emotions that will give us messages and indicators about what needs need to be met and what fears we have and how it is that we can navigate the journey of life. We thank you, God, that there is nothing too hard for you to do. You've raised the dead. You have fed thousands of individuals. And so we know that you're able to fix our minds, our brains, our bodies. And so even now, God, we ask for a total renewal of our minds, both those who are going through depressive symptoms and those who have not experienced it. We all need a mind makeover. And so we ask, God, that tonight you will indeed perform a work upon our minds, on our bodies, upon our spirits. And I pray, God, that for those who are experiencing these severe symptoms, I pray that through your Holy Spirit's power, you will activate those areas of the brain that need renewal, God, that need replenishing, that need neurogenesis. In fact, we praise you tonight that long before we knew that there would be depression, you have created a mechanism in the brain to combat this. It's called neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, where you've created an environment for the brain to renew itself, to replenish itself every single night. And so we pray, God, that you will do your great work in the mind of somebody. May somebody receive healing, deliverance, recovery. May you be the lifter of their heads. And I pray, blessed God, that whatever it is and whichever area they feel they're struggling, help them to know that there is no shame in finding support, in finding help, in finding a therapist, because only wise people go to others for help, because you have provided for us to be in concert with each other and to be in community. And the gifts that you've given to humanity is to bless humanity. And therapists are such gifts to us for our mental well-being. Bless this program, bless this platform, and bless us tonight. And bless all the mother figures in this place, and continue to renew their strength in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great rest of your week. You can join us 7 in the morning, 7 in the evening, 7 days per week. We engage in powerful prayers in this platform. Practice meditation, mindfulness, the study of the word, powerful to transform the mind. And so until we meet, peace be unto you and have a great rest of the evening. Good night, everyone, and God bless.
God bless.
Thanks for joining the 777 Prayer and Health Ministries, where we pray on the promises of prayer and trust in Him who is omnipotent. Join us daily via Zoom using the Zoom code 813-1521 5055 when we pray, praise, and ground our faith on the sure promises to God. Go to 777prayerconference.org to sign up for our email list, to submit a prayer request, or to listen to a recording from our archive. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at 777 Prayer and Health Ministries. Until next time, remember that prayer changes things, people, and circumstances. So, dear listener, pray on.